Nobody warned Generation X that midlife wouldn't feel like a crisis. It would just feel like being tired all the time. This isn't the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but a bone-deep exhaustion that seems to have moved in permanently somewhere around your early 40s. From a psychological standpoint, this is fascinating. This isn't just about getting older. Something specific happened to this generation that created a perfect storm of exhaustion that researchers are only now starting to understand. Let's start with something most people don't realize. Gen X is the first generation in modern history to have less wealth than their parents had at the same age, despite being significantly more educated and working longer hours. A Federal Reserve study found that households headed by someone born in the 1970s had median wealth roughly 18% lower than earlier generations at comparable ages. That's not just a statistic. That's a psychological weight you carry every single day. Your parents might have bought a house on one income while your mom stayed home with 3 kids. In contrast, you and your spouse both work full-time with advanced degrees, and you're still not sure you can afford to retire ever. That cognitive dissonance, that constant background noise of "we're doing everything right but somehow falling behind," is exhausting in ways that have nothing to do with physical tiredness. But the money thing is only part of it. What's really happening is a phenomenon psychologists call role overload, and Gen X is experiencing it at levels no previous generation has faced. You're sandwiched between aging parents who need more help and kids who, let's be honest, are taking longer to launch than you did. You left home at 18 with $200 in a duffel bag. Your 24-year-old has a master's degree and just moved back in because rent is impossible. So, you're managing your mother's doctor appointments while helping your daughter update her resume. You're researching memory care facilities during your lunch break and co-signing student loans after dinner. You're the IT department for your parents, the bank for your kids, and somehow still expected to show up at work like a functional adult who definitely got 8 hours of sleep. Research published in the Journal of Marriage and Family found that this sandwich generation phenomenon peaks for people born between 1965 and 1980. And it's not just about time, it's about decision fatigue. Every single day you're making high-stakes decisions for multiple generations while trying to keep your own life from falling apart. Should Dad stop driving? Can we afford to help with the down payment? Is Mom's forgetfulness normal or something worse? That level of sustained decision-making depletes something called executive function, your brain's ability to plan, focus, and juggle multiple tasks. It's a finite resource, and you're draining it before you even get to your actual job. Speaking of work, let's talk about what happened there, because this is where things get particularly brutal. Gen X entered the workforce during a time when company loyalty still kind of existed. You were told that hard work and dedication would be rewarded. Then you watched that entire system collapse. You survived multiple recessions, endless restructurings, and the complete destruction of the pension system. You adapted. You learned new skills. You became whatever the company needed you to be. And now you're in middle management, which means you're old enough to remember how things used to work, but young enough that retirement is still decades away. You're translating between executives who think everyone should just work harder and younger employees who expect work-life balance. You're the generation that gets it from both sides. A study from the American Psychological Association found that workers aged 40 to 55 report the highest levels of workplace stress, higher than both younger and older colleagues. You're dealing with the pressure of peak earning years, the fear of becoming obsolete, and the exhaustion of constantly proving you're still relevant. You can't afford to slow down, but you're running on fumes. And here's something that doesn't get talked about enough. Gen X is also the first generation to experience sustained digital overload during their peak working years. You didn't grow up with smartphones, so you remember what it felt like to actually disconnect. But you adopted the technology during your prime career-building years, which means you never got to establish the boundaries that younger generations are now fighting for. You answer emails at 10 p.m. sad p.m. because you remember when not being available meant you weren't committed. You're on Slack, Teams, email, and 3 different project management platforms because that's what the job requires. Your brain never fully shuts off because the technology that was supposed to make work easier just made it endless. What makes this particularly insidious is that this exhaustion doesn't announce itself dramatically. There's no single breaking point. It's just this gradual dimming, like someone slowly turning down your energy levels, and you barely notice until one day you realize you can't remember the last time you felt actually rested. You wake up tired. You go to bed tired. Tired has become your baseline. But this isn't just about being busy or having a lot on your plate. What's happening to Gen X at midlife is something deeper, something that connects to how your specific generation was wired from the beginning. Remember the latchkey generation? That early training in self-reliance created something psychologists call an internal locus of control. You learned young that if something needs to get done, you do it yourself. You don't wait for help. You don't complain. You just handle it. That served you well for decades, making you resourceful, capable, and independent. But there's a dark side to that conditioning that's showing up now. Fast forward to today. You're drowning in responsibilities, and that same psychological wiring that made you so capable is the exact thing preventing you from reaching out. Asking for help feels like failure. It feels like admitting you're not strong enough. So, you keep pushing, keep managing, keep sacrificing your own needs because that's what you've always done. Here's what that looks like neurologically. Chronic stress, the kind that doesn't have an end date, fundamentally changes your brain structure. Research from Yale shows that sustained stress actually shrinks the prefrontal cortex while enlarging the amygdala, your fear center. Translation: your ability to think clearly and make good decisions decreases while your anxiety increases. You're literally becoming less capable of handling the exact situations that are overwhelming you, and your body is keeping score. Gen X has higher rates of metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular issues, and autoimmune conditions than previous generations did at the same age. That's not genetic bad luck. That's decades of running on stress hormones with no real recovery time. Your body has been in fight-or-flight mode for so long, it's forgotten what safety feels like. But what makes this especially cruel is the invisibility of it all. You look fine. You show up. You get things done. Nobody sees the constant mental calculation you're doing, the weight you're carrying, or the exhaustion you're masking. Society sees a functional adult and assumes everything's manageable. There's also this weird generational guilt that nobody talks about. You're too young to fully relate to your aging parents' world, but too old to connect with the problems your kids are facing. You exist in this strange middle space where you're supposed to have all the answers, but you're just as confused and overwhelmed as everyone else. You just hide it better, because that's what your generation does. And the kicker, there's no finish line in sight. Your parents might need care for another decade or more. Your kids might need financial support well into their 30s. Your career demands aren't decreasing. The idea of coasting into a comfortable retirement feels like a joke when you look at your savings and your obligations. So, what actually helps? The first thing is recognizing that this isn't a personal failure. This is a systemic issue affecting an entire generation. You're not weak because you're struggling. You're human, dealing with an unprecedented combination of stressors that no generation before you faced in quite this way. Second, that self-reliance that's been your strength needs an upgrade. Self-reliance in your 20s meant handling things alone. Self-reliance in your 40s and 50s means being smart enough to build systems and ask for help before you break. It means recognizing that managing everything yourself isn't strength. It's just unsustainable. Practical things matter too. If you're caring for aging parents, look into respite care, even if it feels like giving up. If you're supporting adult children, set actual boundaries around what you can and cannot provide. If work is bleeding into every hour, start with one boundary, just one, and defend it ruthlessly. Your body needs actual rest, not just sleep squeezed between obligations. That might mean saying no to things that seem important. It definitely means letting some things be good enough instead of perfect. Here's the thing about being in the middle. You're getting crushed by the weight, yes, but you're also the load-bearing wall holding everything together. Your generation is doing something incredibly difficult with very little recognition and even less support. The exhaustion you feel isn't weakness. It's the completely logical response to carrying more than any one person should have to carry. And maybe, just maybe, the most radical thing you could do isn't to push harder. It's to finally admit that you can't do this alone, and you were never supposed to. That realization won't make the weight disappear, but it might help you figure out how to carry it without losing yourself completely in the process. The relentless pressure Gen X faces at midlife isn't a character flaw. It's the predictable outcome of a specific set of historical circumstances colliding with outdated expectations. You were built to be self-sufficient, then handed a world that requires an entire support system to navigate. Recognizing that contradiction isn't giving up. If this analysis of the Gen X experience resonates with the exhaustion you feel every day, please subscribe to our channel and like this video. We are dedicated to uncovering the psychological truths and historical pressures that define our modern lives. Join our community as we navigate these challenges together. Your support helps us continue this important conversation. The next chapter of our shared history will be explored soon.